Hey YouTube, this is Ozark's brother Jerry, and coming to you with this parsha for this week. It's Miketz, and it means at the end, and I believe it's at the end of 2 exact years from when the cupbearer and the baker had the baker was executed and the cupbearer was restored to his position. So it's been 2 years since that happened, and Pharaoh has a dream. So as a parsha overview, and it's Genesis 41 through 44:17. And as an overview, we have Joseph explains Pharaoh's dream to him that I spoke of, and Pharaoh makes Joseph a ruler. And Joseph's brothers come to buy food. Then Joseph's brothers make a second trip to buy food. And finally, Joseph's silver cup is missing. And I would like to look at Joseph's management skills. And I'm focusing on his ascendancy to the Lord of Pharaoh's house. Consequently, I'll be using some verses on Joseph outside of the parsha. But I believe that we all need to take our jobs, seriously, whether it's from man or our creator. Insofar as our creator's, jobs to us, in Revelations 1:6 it says, "And hath made us kings and priests unto Elohim and his Father, unto God and his Father, to him be glory and dominion forever and ever. Amen." Being a king is a management position. The Melchizedek priesthood, by virtue of definition, incorporates a sovereign component to the priesthood. This, being a sovereign, is a management position. Being a pastor is a management position. I just think people should take management jobs seriously. I was a manager for a number of years with the government, and my fellow managers, when we had our management training, off and on, it was like they're just out of the office to have fun. And I actually took it seriously because we're talking about people's futures, with the agency. And I just think it's important, and I've seen people in management positions in the service of Elohim that had they had some real management training, I think they would have done a much better job. And then on a parallel track, for the longest time, I pondered Revelations 2:9, and that is, "I know thy work and tribulation and poverty, but thou art rich. And I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan." And for the longest time, who are these people who say they're Jews and not Jews? There's a number of scenarios that you could incorporate that piece of advice into. However, I came to the conclusion that if someone is a real Jew, actually, a follower of the Messiah, that they'll be walking like the Messiah. And in the fact that Joshua is a forerunner or type of the Messiah, it would be interesting to compare his management skills, to the Messiah's. So that's what I would like to do. Now, there are 5 functions of management. First is planning. Second is organizing. Third is staffing. Fourth is leading. Fifth is controlling. And I'm not saying this works perfect. It doesn't. Yeshua didn't make mistakes and have to reassess. So, but anyhow, I'm not saying it's perfect. It's not, but it works, I believe. Isaiah 55:8, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, saith the Lord." So, we're putting this man-made management system and comparing it to the Messiah and to Joshua. So it's not going to be, it's going to be far from perfect. So let's take a look at it. Okay, I will read that top to you. Now, I said that the first function of management is planning, and that's what I have at the top. And that is planning means to create a framework that helps an organization achieve its goals in a period of time. And this is composed of marketing strategies, which have a fundamental goal of increasing sales and achieving a competitive advantage. And it has a team building component and a goal setting of long-term and short-term goals. So let's look at this. Matthew 5, 1 and 2. Yeshua, and seeing the multitude, Matthew 5, 1 and 2, and seeing the multitudes, he went up into a mountain, and when he was set, his disciples came unto him. And he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, and that's an advantage of team building. I know at least a couple of times Yeshua took his apostles aside for just instruction and instruction. So and I have three examples of each I tried to come up with. Matthew 28, 19 and 20. Go ye therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Ghost, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world. Amen. Now that's a long-term goal. And the goal is to reach everybody for salvation. So a third example, I said that's an example of long-term goal setting, right? A third example, Luke 14, 28 through 31. For which of you, intending to build a tower, sitteth not down first and counteth the cost, whether he have sufficient to finish, lest happily after he hath laid the foundation and is not able to finish it, and all that behold it begin to mock him, saying, this man began to build and was not able to finish. Or what king going to make war against another king sitteth not down first and consulteth whether he be able with 10,000 to meet him that cometh against him with 20,000. So that's goal setting. I mean, how many men are you going to need to defeat someone else in battle? And Yeshua is given that as an example. Of management. So let's look at Joshua. See what he did. Genesis 41:34. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land, and take up the fifth part of the land of Egypt in the 7 plenteous years. So he's already interpreted the dream, and then he comes up with, and maybe the Father gave this to him, I don't know, but he comes up with taking 20%. So he's telling Pharaoh a short or near-term goal. Another example of Joseph in regards to planning, Genesis 43:32, and they set on for him by himself, and for them by themselves, and for the Egyptians which did eat with him by themselves, because the Egyptians might not eat bread with the Hebrews, for that is an abomination to the Egyptians. So that's Joseph team building. He wasn't too good to eat with his staff, and I'm sure that encouraged them to be able to take meals with him. Another example of Joseph, Genesis 39:23, the keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because Yahweh was with him, and that which he did, Yahweh made it prosper. So these are short-term goals. Joseph set goals for his fellow prisoners.
Because that which he did, and let's see, the keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because Yahweh was with him, and that which he did, Yahweh made to prosper. So I think I actually have the wrong verse there. But anyhow, let's go to the next one. Can't let perfection be the enemy of completion. Okay, our next function of management is organizing. Pretty fancy visual aids, eh? So, organizing's at the top. And you can look this up. It's just the 5 functions of management. But I'll read it to you. Organizing is the mobilization of people and resources in order to bring a plan to fruition. Each member of the team is assigned responsibilities most suited for them, while resources are allocated according to need. Now, there's not a lot in here about how Joshua, he was number 2 in the land of Egypt. There's not a lot in here about how he accomplished his task, but let's look at the morsels that we can find. But first, let's look at the Messiah. Mark 6:7. And he called unto him the 12, and began to send them forth 2 by 2, and gave them power over unclean spirits. So he's mobilization and resources. He mobilized the apostles 2 by 2, and he gave them his divine power, and he even gave them instructions on what to do on the road. Another example is Genesis 12:3-6. Then took Mary a pound of ointment of spikenard, very costly, and anointed the feet of Yeshua, and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the odor of the ointment. Then saith one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, which should betray him, why was not this ointment sold for 300 pence and given to the poor? This, he said, not that he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief and had the bag, and bear what was put therein. So, in regards to organizing, you assign your team the responsibilities most suited for them. So Judas was assigned the money holder because he cared about money more than anything else. Third example of the Messiah, Mark 8:34. And when he had called the people unto him with his disciples also, he said unto them, whosoever will come after me, let him deny himself and take up the torture stake and follow me. So he's mobilizing those who will listen into the service of the Most High. He wants everybody that will to follow him. Okay, so let's look at what Joshua does in regards to the organizing function of management. Genesis 41:34. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land, and take up the 5th part of the land of Egypt into the 7 plenteous years. So here, Joseph's already interpreted the dream, and once again, the father may have put this idea in his head, but I think this was after the dream. So he mobilizes a layer of government over the current layer, and that's these officers over the land, at least insofar as the crop gathering and storage. So another example of organizing for Joshua is Genesis 41:46. And Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went throughout all the land of Egypt. So, it doesn't succinctly say so, but Joseph was mobilizing the resources in the form of crop storage points and standard directions to the aforementioned officers in that previous layer of government. Another example of Joshua is Genesis 45:18-19. And take your father and your households and come unto me, and I will give you the good of the land of Egypt, and ye shall eat the fat of the land. Now thou art commanded this do ye. Take ye wagons out of the land of Egypt for your little ones and for your wives, and bring your father, and come. So Joseph has in essence mobilized the nation of Israel. And we know that it's going to come to Egypt, and all the people are going to learn different skills, and they're going to leave a nation where before they just came in as herdsmen. Okay. So now we're going to go into the staffing function of management. And this includes hiring and training of employees. The manager must pick the most suitable candidate in order to work according to the goals or plans laid out. Okay. So that's my staffing function up here. So, all right. So for Messiah, I have Matthew 9:9. And as Yeshua passed forth from thence, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the receipt of custom. And he saith unto him, Follow me. And he arose and followed him. So here we have Yeshua starting to staff up his disciples. Another example, Luke 9:18. And it came to pass, as he was alone praying, his disciples were with him. And he asked them, saying, Whom say the people that I am? And so Yeshua was constantly training them, because he was alone, and just his disciples came up, and he was always teaching. Matthew 20:1-16, and that is, even though there's functions of management, and this is in regards to capitalism, it doesn't have to be. So Matthew 20:1-16, I'm going to read that. And that is, For the kingdom of heaven is like unto a man that is a householder, which went out early in the morning to hire laborers into his vineyard. And when he had agreed with the laborers for a penny a day, he sent them into his vineyard. And he went out about the third hour, and saw others standing idle in the marketplace, and said unto them, Go ye also into the vineyard, and whatsoever is right I will give you. And they went their way. Again, he went out about the 6th and 9th hour, and did likewise. And about the 11th hour he went out, and found others standing idle, and saith unto them, Why stand ye here all the day idle? They say unto him, Because no man hath hired us. He saith unto them, Go ye also into the vineyard, and whatsoever is right, that shall ye receive. So when even was come, the Lord of the vineyard saith unto his steward, Call the laborers, and give them their hire, beginning from the last unto the first. And when they came that were hired about the 11th hour, they received every man a penny. But when the first came, they supposed that they should have received more. And they likewise received every man a penny. And when they had received it, they murmured against the good man of the house, saying, These last have wrought but 1 hour, and thou hast made them equal unto us, which have borne the burden and heat of the day. But he answered one of them, and said, Friend, I do thee no wrong. Didst not thou agree with me for a penny? Take that thine is, and go thy way. I will give unto this last even as unto thee. Is it not lawful for me to do what I will with mine own? Is thine eye evil, because I am good? So last shall be first, and first last. For many be called, but few chosen. So, Yeshua knew the laborers for his kingdom followed contrary principles to capitalism, but he explains it to them, and that's part of the job of staffing, is explaining to your employees what their job is. So let's look at what what Joshua did in this instance of staffing. Genesis 46:33-34. And it shall come to pass, when Pharaoh shall call you, and shall say, What is your occupation? That ye shall say, Thy servant's trade hath been about cattle from our youth even until now. Both we and also our fathers, that ye may dwell in the land of Goshen, for every shepherd is an abomination unto the Egyptians. So Joseph is training his family, to ensure a successful startup of this nation. Excuse me. So in chapter 47, Joseph ends up taking all the Egyptian silver, livestock, and land for Pharaoh. Even though this saved their life, this trained the population of Egypt to be docile and subservient to government. And I got to add, this is a relationship to government that many leaders today would envy. And the UN has said they use food as a weapon. So my last example here is, I got this from www.biblearchery. Let me start that over. www.biblearchaeology.org. So Genesis 45:8 states that Joseph was made the Lord of Pharaoh's house. This title has an exact Egyptian counterpart, and that is chief steward of the king. This position's main job was the detailed supervision of the king's personal agricultural estates, the number of which was vast. This position was also in charge of the royal granaries where the nation's grain was stored. So, you know, Joshua was in charge of all this, so he was hiring and having these people trained. All right. Let's go to our next function of management, which is leading. This function involves providing an environment that is conducive for motivation, because motivation comes from within. You can't motivate anybody to do anything. They have to want to do it themselves. All you can do is provide an environment where they might want to do something. Let me get this down here a little bit. Okay. So, all right. We're leading. This function involves providing an environment that is conducive for motivation, giving instruction and guidance, facilitate communication and encouragement, and the manager must be the head of the organization and provide a clear way of doing things. So being a manager is not always easy. So our first example with Yeshua, Luke 9:47. And Yeshua, perceiving the thought of their heart, took a child and set him by him. So Yeshua was proactive. He looked into their heart and knew what they were thinking. And then he proceeds to give them an object lesson. So Yeshua is now a standing leader, the best. And Luke 9:20-21, he said unto them, But whom say ye that I am? Peter answered, saying, The Messiah of Elohim. And he straitly charged them and commanded them to tell no man that thing. So the apostles knew who knew he was the Messiah and had no doubt of his authority. Because that's part of leading, is they have to know who the manager is. Mark 6:7, and he called unto him the 12 and began to send them forth by two and two, and gave them power over unclean spirits. So here Yeshua provides an environment for the apostles to grow in him by sending them out in pairs and then giving them power. He then proceeds to give explicit instructions on how to find accommodations and what to do if they're not received. So that's the instruction and guidance. So let's look at Joshua. Genesis 45:5. Now therefore be not grieved nor angry with yourselves that ye sold me hither. For Elohim did send me before you to preserve life. So here Joseph creates the proper environment by keeping his goal of glorifying Yahweh. He didn't take it personal of all the horrible things that had happened to him. He realized every step of the way he was, being used by Elohim to make him what he was. Next is Genesis 44:1. And he commanded the steward of his house, saying, Fill the men's sacks with food, as much as they can carry, and put every man's money in his sack's mouth. So here Joseph is always clear when giving instructions to those subordinate possessions. Genesis 42:6. And Joseph was the governor over the land, and he it was that sold all the people of the land. And Joseph's brethren came and bowed down themselves before him with their faces to the earth. So Joseph's brothers now had no doubt who the head of the situation was. So, whereas before, of course, they didn't know who he was at this point. Before, they had real issues with his dream of them making obeisance to him. Let's see here. All right, so our next function of management is controlling. Controlling involves making assessments and rethinking strategies. Management must put ceilings on certain operations while regulating others in order to ensure seamless productivity. So our first example of Yeshua in this management function is Mark 6:11, and it reads, "And whosoever shall not receive you nor hear you, when ye depart thence, shake off the dust under your feet for a testimony against them. Verily I say unto you, it shall be more tolerable for Sodom and Gomorrah in the day of judgment than for that city." So here, Yeshua is putting a ceiling on how much time the apostles were to invest in unrepentant cities. You know, if they don't want you, just shake off the dust and be done with them. So, next example, Matthew 17:27. Notwithstanding, lest we should offend them, notwithstanding, lest we should offend them, go thou to the sea and cast an hook, and take up the fish that first cometh up. And when thou hast opened his mouth, thou shalt find a piece of money. That take and give unto them for me and thee. So Yeshua, he knew the situation, but he assessed the situation and instructed Peter to get the tribute money to avoid offending the tribute taker. So next is Matthew 5:25, and that reads, "Agree with thine adversary quickly." And this is Yeshua talking, and so was the previous one. Agree with thine adversary quickly, whilst thou art in the way with him, lest at any time the adversary deliver thee to the judge, and the judge deliver thee to the officer, and thou be cast in prison. So Yeshua puts a ceiling on how high a disagreement should go. So before, it just, even if you're right, maybe, things are going to go bad for you. So let's see what Joseph has to say in regards of controlling. Genesis 47:15 and 16. "And when money failed in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came unto Joseph and said, Give us bread, for why should we die in thy presence? For the money faileth. And Joseph said, Give your cattle, and I will give you for your cattle if money fail." So, Joseph reassesses the situation. There's no more money, so let's just change our, he instructs his servants to start taking cattle for the grain. So that's an example of controlling and rethinking strategies and making assessments. Genesis 41:49. "And Joseph gathered and Joseph gathered grain as the sand of the sea very much until he left numbering, for it was without number." So here, Joseph's reassessing his earlier orders of counting the grain. He then realizes there was no return on investment and told his servants to cease counting the grain. Just keep stacking it. Next is Genesis 41:56. "And the famine was over all the face of the earth, and Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold unto the Egyptians, and the famine waxed sore in the land of Egypt." So Joseph once again assesses when the famine was over the earth, and then he instructs his servants to begin depleting the stored grain. So So those are the 5 functions of, excuse me, those are the 5 functions of management. So in conclusion, I would just say that, if you have a management in a position of Yahweh, in Yahweh's service, take it seriously. Learn what it is to properly manage an activity. I personally haven't seen a born manager. Even managers with training get better with more training. So, thanks a lot for listening to me. I know this is kind of long, but I just want to show that we should spend some time and be somewhat analytic in the service of the Father. So thanks for listening.